You're listening to The Real Well Show with Kathy Fetke, the real estate investor's resource. Hey, I'm Rich Fetke.
And I'm Kathy Fetke.
And we're here with another real wealth story. I'm really excited about this couple. It's like looking at when you have a husband and wife, they're both MBAs, they're both in tech in Northern California, and they own an investment property. And the investment property is making them $0 in cash flow every month. So what we learned from them is what they did with that investment property to 10 times their cash flow and create real wealth.
Ben and Sophie, welcome to the Real Well Show.
Thank you.
All right, good to have you here. Can't wait for you to share your story.
So it sounds like, Sophie, you were already interested in real estate and understood investing. Ben, not so much. So
Yes, absolutely. I married into it, you could say.
Lucky you.
Yeah, and I can't take all of the credit. I would say I learned most of it from my family who, since once they immigrated into the US and were able to afford a house, that was the first thing they would buy. And then they bought their first investment property. And then my mom convinced me at the age of 23, like, you need to buy your first investment property now. So
That's fantastic.
I got a lot of help along the way, I would definitely say.
what inspired them to get into real estate?
I don't know. It's a good question. I almost wonder if it's like an Asian stereotype or something. It's like, you probably heard it from other investors of similar background. It's like, I think they just felt that that's, a safe asset. They knew how to work with people, and it was somewhere where they trusted they could put their money and they knew where it was going. Right. And so, so they've always kind of been in it, ever since I was born, really. And so having somebody that I trusted, kind of teaching me the ropes, and frankly, like, learning a ton more now that we're part of the Real Wealth Network. I mean, I only knew about this much about real estate investing, but there's a whole other world to it. And so just learning with Ben along the way has been really interesting.
That's cool. So now you get to say, yeah, you were right, Mom.
Yeah,
Right?
about a lot of things. So
Absolutely.
I thought you were saying Ben would have to say that.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome. So, and then, so what was the process? And so you bought your first investment property at 23, which is cool because Kathy inspired our daughter, Karina, to buy for her first investment property at 24. So
Yeah.
And that's been a great move. So,
yeah.
and what was it for you beyond Mom?
Yeah, I mean, started there. We property managed it ourselves for a few years. Frankly, it was between like my mom and my brother, helping with any maintenance issues and tenant issues. I mean, they were amazing. And then it was actually my brother who got into real wealth himself a few years before we did.
Great.
And just started talking about it and saying, hey, like, have you thought about out-of-state investing? Like, you've had this property for a long time. And then got us thinking about, other possibilities, particularly as maintenance costs just started to build up a little bit on our side, having a house in the Bay Area. And then when I married Ben and he started running the financials around what we were making on that property, I think he kind of took it to the next level and pushed us over the board. So I'll let you.
What you were making or not making?
Yeah.
So, I mean, on paper, it was making money, but, every year there was maintenance costs, replacing the roof, replacing dry rot in the bathroom. That was more or less making it break even. I would say more so for me when we got married was suddenly becoming a property manager. And at the time, we were living in the Mission in San Francisco. Both of us were traveling for work and, coming home on weekends, and, Sophie's mom or brother calling us and saying, hey, your property has no heat. You need to change the water heater. Come over. Can you clean out the gutters? I was like, well, I didn't necessarily sign up for this. And at the time, I mean, I didn't, I still don't. I frankly didn't have the skills of a homeowner. I lived in a 600 square foot apartment, nor as a landlord. So when he had done a 1031 exchange of one of his own properties, purchased in Cleveland, purchased several properties there, and I looked at the numbers of what he was getting, and I'd kind of been wanting to the property had appreciated so much that we had all this equity that was not cash flowing. So I had in my mind that there could be something better we were doing with that money. And when I saw the numbers that he was getting, it was, it was to a certain extent eye-opening, and it's changed the course of our lives. That we said, okay, this real estate could be a thing, and it could be a new vehicle for us as a couple for how we're investing our savings from our jobs. And so we did a 1031 exchange. Ended up purchasing, as many of your investors have, our first properties in Cincinnati, where we ended up with about 7 properties at like a 50% LT loan to value. And we went from a position where we were collecting maybe $3,500 a month for rent to more than doubling that in terms of our gross rent, but collecting that much in terms of cash flow once we completed the 1031 exchange. So it ended up being a fantastic transaction, and that property had more than doubled in value since she bought it. She bought it at perfect timing. So it got us into real wealth in a big way, and then to a certain extent changed the course of our lives.
Yeah.
And
That's so
everything we do.
cool.
And you don't have to fix any toilet. You don't have to fix toilets or.
That's right. Well, except in yeah.
No, we
he
don't.
doesn't do that in our own house for sure.
No, I definitely don't have to fix any toilets. And I guess we're able to do the things that, every investor does things differently. We're able to do the things that we like to do and we're capable of doing, which is, working with the property managers, financing, all of that. Whereas, to your point, that the fixing the toilets, that's just not what we do. Although, now as a homeowner, I do more of it.
Right.
Or actually, I do more of calling her brother.
Yeah.
Calling her,
Nice.
He still does it, even at our house.
That's cool. So you made the shift from being a property manager to managing your property managers in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so cool. That's fantastic. And so did you guys meet in school?
Yeah, we met.
Yeah, we did actually. I was in undergrad and he was in an MBA student at Berkeley, and we met in Chinese class.
Oh, that's great.
Randomly. So we met in school a while ago.
I'm just curious about how long after you met or after you got married did you kind of create your plan for the future, like where you want to be financially?
Right. Do you want me?
Yeah, you go for it.
I mean, I think there's a few. I guess there's 2 things that happened when we got married. So Sophie had purchased her first house well before we got married. So she had a nice head start on me. So that's how I married into this. And I think there were 2 things that when we got married. I think first is I got some really heavy pressure for us to buy our first house that we lived in. And that
where's the
ended
pressure
up
from?
Excuse me?
From my mom.
Got it. Okay,
They teamed up. Her parents had teamed up on me.
Okay, good.
After we had committed to the engagement and the wedding, and then that was well on the way, then there were, from different angles. Her mother was a real estate agent at the time, so she started sending me listings in the East Bay. None of them were in San Francisco, although I couldn't have necessarily afforded to buy a condo apartment in the city. So we ended up buying our first house in Oakland and going from 600 square feet in the Mission to maybe 1,100 square feet in Oakland. But I would say that house from my side ended up being my first investment in real estate, and what ended up eventually being a live-in flip for us that substantially contributed to our portfolio today. And the second piece to that is when we got married, I started thinking about our time and what our future and what our plan was. And I guess there's the what and the why, but this is what I do for a living. I created a model, a business model that said, okay, what would it take for us to have more time and to have that financial freedom? What type of passive income would we need, and what type of assets would we need, and how long would that take? And when we got married, I'd estimated, to hit our number, it was going to take us, 20 to 25 years. By then we were going to be 60 to 65. And, we actually just surpassed that original number that I built into the model.
Amazing. Was your original plan real estate, or was it?
No, it wasn't. So we just surpassed that actually after 7 years of being married last year. Now, of course, in those
Nice.
7 years, things have happened. The goalposts have moved quite a little bit. We have 2 kids now. We have
Oh, wow.
parents who we have to, worry about, senior care options and stuff like that. Life happens, so the circumstances change, but it's certainly significant that in 7 years, we're able to surpass our goal of, maybe a third of the time. And Rich, to your point, the original model wasn't in real estate. So I think there are a couple of factors that allowed us to go so fast. There's the appreciation that we got from owning and selling 2 homes in California, over the past 10 years that we 1031 exchanged.
Mhm.
And I didn't build any of that in the model. There's the cash on cash return that we get out of our real estate portfolio. It is probably what we get now is probably twice what I had originally assumed on an equities-based portfolio. And then third is our savings rate, and has exceeded what I originally planned for, partly from our income and from our lifestyle remaining relatively constant over the past 7 years.
Nice
Wow.
work. Congrats. That's really good.
Incredible.
Cool.
When you say cash on cash return, you've leveraged the properties, right? 50% LTV is what you said?
We're still at about 50%. Yeah. I mean, if you build equities planning models, usually assume something like what's called a safe withdrawal rate. And most retirement planners use about a 4% safe withdrawal rate. And I think that's as good as anything. I think that the dividend yield on the S&P is probably like 2% right now. So if you're withdrawing 4%, you'd have to withdraw some principal, but 4% is as good as anything. And if you look at our portfolio right now, it's probably earning around, let's call it 8%, right? So we're able to, with half the amount of equity invested, the equity's grown, but with half the amount of equity invested, we're able to get, the same cash flow number. So that's one of the reasons why we've been able to get there faster.
Nice.
Yeah, I was curious with our fund, we have kind of our plan is to leverage to the hilt some of the homes and then have some of them all cash so that if we needed to, we could just easily sell those if we ever needed to cover payments.
Yes.
So I was curious, I just yesterday talked to some of our friends who are buying their homes all cash because they just want the cash flow. Have you run the numbers either way? And what do you think works best?
Great question.
Yeah, so it ends up being there's multiple reasons I think why we maybe different investors ended up with the same result. I mean, we do have quite a few, let's call it half of our portfolio all cash, and we continue to make all cash purchases. And I think there's different reasons for it. I mean, one, very practically, it's nice to have that stable cash flow base, so that, if things hit like last year where there's an event or a time when you can have multiple vacancies or you're not collecting rent in multiple properties, there's certainly security in having some amount of stable cash flow from those all cash properties, so you're not worrying about suddenly bleeding out cash, especially if you're not working full-time with W-2 jobs. Your other question, with the math, I mean, I think if you're doing the analysis, there does end up being a break-even point based on the cap rate versus what current interest rates are. That you have to find a cap rate that has, who knows what, 2 to 3 points above your interest rate in order for it to be cash flowing better than if you could get just all cash. And finding properties with that spread, frankly, it's not impossible. It's just more work. I can't just pick any property off your inventory as when we first started, and get that spread. I'm making off-market offers, all cash, all of that stuff in order to get those cash flows. So it is a little harder to do now, but it can be done. And I'd say very practically for us, if people do the math around to hit a certain cash flow goal and you're at a 75% loan to value, who knows what, maybe you're getting $200 a house, you're going to end up with, and I've heard it on your listeners, 40 or 50 houses or doors or more just to hit your cash flow number. And especially now when the inventory isn't high, that's a lot of work. So, if I could just buy all quad properties and they could close soon, and they would hit our cash flow goal, I would stay leveraged and I would do that. But those aren't easy for me to find. So I'm actually finding we're buying off-market properties all cash, and I haven't necessarily pulled the cash out of them because it's like it's getting us to our goals faster than if I was trying to do everything leveraged at $150, $200 a door. I'd end up with an inordinate, a large amount of properties, and it would take me a long time to get there. It'd be a lot of work to manage, frankly.
What markets are you in, or some of them?
We're in a lot of markets. So, we started out in Cincinnati, and then I started purchasing properties in Houston and Birmingham. We also, when we sold our Oakland house, we ended up buying several of the new builds in Florida. So those are in Southwest Florida, and Palm Coast. So those are the four. We're also actually in Detroit. And we're purchasing now. Most of the purchasing I'm doing, active purchasing right now, is in Birmingham, and we still have some properties in Florida that are contracted, and we're hoping will close sometime this year.
Great. So Sophie, do you just love hearing him talk like this?
This is pretty much like 30 to 40% of our conversation.
Tell us about it.
Whatever idea it is that it's funny that you mentioned that, because we don't have a ton of other friends in our situation. So we are each other's sounding boards when it comes to ideas and next steps and strategy. And, that's why we want to leverage the network, frankly, to meet more folks who are in our same situation, and try to connect with other people we can share ideas with. I know that Ben has actually reached out to some folks that he's seen on your podcast just to connect and share ideas, share markets, share insights. So hopefully I'm not the only one listening to this all the time now.
Right.
Yes, this is the majority of our conversation.
Well, we're each other's sounding boards. I have a lot of ideas about our real estate portfolio, and she has ideas about, and she takes care of all the contracting as far as what happens to, our house.
Our primary house.
We're building
big job.
Building a pantry,
lot of responsibility.
Yes, there's very clear division of responsibilities.
That's great.
So I'm curious, Sophie, what advice would you give to other spouses who maybe just really want to get their partner on board? And what does that take?
Yeah. I think, in retrospect, especially when we talk to friends and stuff who always ask us questions like, hey, what advice can you give? When should we start? Is now a good time? These are all the typical questions you get from folks who've never done this. It's, I think it's the same advice that we've heard from others on your network, which is just start now. There really isn't a good time to start. Start as early as possible. You should have started 10 years ago, but
right.
You can't now. That's okay. You can start now. So just getting in it as soon as you can, and getting the knowledge that you can as quickly as possible too, because
it's a big one, isn't it? Just getting that first property and the knowledge and the mindset shift that comes with owning your first property. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And you're never going to get it at the peak. I think everyone's waiting for the perfect bottom to I'm going to extract every dollar that I can from the market. But one thing that we talked about is take 80% and run, or get to good enough and execute. And so that's what.
Well, it's funny you say that, because you bought your first property in 2009, right? Is that?
So I think it was about that.
Well, she
very
got
different market.
I have been to the bottom without even knowing it, though, to be honest.
That couldn't have been better timing. You must have known somehow, because everything was so cheap, and you were in a position to buy. It's just incredible. Fast forward to today, things are very different. So a lot of times when you come from that mentality, it's hard to adjust to less cash flow, higher prices, more competition. So as you are, it sounds like you're still in the acquisition mindset. How do you get yourself around, well, okay, this is so different now. It's, I wish I'd bought 10 years ago, but I didn't. So yeah, how do you get to buying properties now when there's so much more expensive?
Yeah. I'm gonna let Ben answer that one, because he handles a lot of our acquisitions these days, and I think he thinks a lot about that.
I mean, it's a good question, right? If you're used to, who knows what, 10% cash on cash and
Yeah. Or 20. I mean, it was
or 20. Yes, I remember hearing one of your podcasts and someone's like, I only buy 20% cash on cash.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, we're just in the situation where we are, and we're trying to reach a passive cash flow number, and you take what the market gives you. But I mean, our strategy has evolved, and also as you become a more experienced investor, you get more agile and you could try different things. You know, like I said, if I could buy all new constructions with warranties, quads, and they were closing in time, and the prices and the cash flows were good, just like we did, who knows, 2-3 years ago, I'd continue to buy those, but those don't exist. So now I'm buying, who knows what, I've bought some rental resales off market where the rent is below market, price below market, might have some pending repairs that I'm going to have to do in the next turn, but they get me the cash flows I need. And I'm buying them all cash. And so I'm working with what the market gives me, and those are getting me you have to set some minimum standards also in terms of margin and safety of what you're willing to buy, which even if you're buying all cash, you have to decide what your standard is as well. So I think for us, we've just kind of evolved a little bit in working with what the market gives us.
Really good. Really good. So this is a feature we do on the podcast and everything. We call it Real Wealth Story. So it's just getting your story of where you were and where you are now and where you want to go. So the big question that I always have to ask is, what is real wealth to you? Like, what's that? When you think about this is what real wealth is to us as a couple, what would you say?
Yeah.
I guess I'll start. I think we have a little bit of a different perspective on it. So
typically,
I would say for me, real wealth is the first term that comes to mind is like optionality. I don't have the vision necessarily of what I will be doing, who knows, one day when I am truly job optional. But I love this idea of being able to have the time to explore that. I think that my life in particular has been, from a career perspective, has been fairly linear. I went to college, I went to grad school, I went to a management consulting role. I've been in tech now for 5 years, and I can continue to do that. And I've always kind of, I think, been expected to move a particular way. But this idea of real wealth and job optionality is still new, actually, in my mind, and starting to percolate. I don't feel the stress of, okay, I have to get to the next, get promoted. I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to answer every recruiting call because I need to get to the next level. Now I can think about, hey, like maybe I want to do a complete pivot, and who knows, go into education or nonprofit, or just like allowing my mind to have that type of creative space and time to dabble a little bit. And who knows, maybe like I'll do that for a while and come back to tech. But just, it's a relief. It really is.
Time freedom, huh?
It is. And just is, and I know we talk about this all the time, but it's funny. We often talk about it when we're stressed about work. It's like our release.
Wow.
We use it as a way of saying, let's not talk about work. Let's talk about our future and how close we are to it. It's like what that's going to be like. And that gives us something to look forward to. So
a positive focus.
Totally.
Yeah. So, I mean, certainly time was a motivator for me, and you heard that, and there's a component of real wealth that's around passive income. But I think one expected outcome of this for me is the wealth of knowledge that I've gained in this journey through investing in real estate. And I think this is something you hear in a lot of your podcasts. There's the sense of empowerment and confidence that comes with that. I think that has turned out to be a form of wealth in itself. That I possess, that we built this business, that we built this passive income stream, and I still have a knowledge to learn and gain mastery, and continue to learn, who knows what. It becomes a process and a mindset, like you said, and less of an outcome that we're trying to drive towards. And so then that's, and that's probably why you started Real Wealth in this education, but that's been one thing that I've gained from this. And I think it's wealth of knowledge that's an asset in itself.
It's an asset no one can take away.
Absolutely.
It keeps getting better. I love that. Yeah, and it keeps giving back, keeps giving you returns.
I think it keeps on giving you returns, and there becomes almost a desire to grow and invest in it, even after, who knows what, even after maybe you don't need to have a job anymore. And you hear a lot of investors, real estate becomes a passion, and you want to continue to learn and invest and learn about new ways of investing and it becomes a mindset and a process beyond, just trying to hit some passive income number.
Yeah.
That's
and then
really
part of that is also being able to share that with, family and friends. And,
Right.
we get a lot of questions now about our strategy and our plan. And, we finally have maybe one or two friends who are like dipping their toes into it and have started actually.
Oh, good.
Well, it took us
Good.
about 3 or 4 years to convince them. But, I think just being able to provide others with similar opportunity has been very fulfilling.
Love it.
Yeah.
Nice. Good stuff.
All right. So any last tips you would give to our listeners who are dipping their toes in the water?
Or about to.
About to.
I'll let you give the last advice.
Sure. I mean, I think Sophie said it herself about getting started. I think for most people, the path to financial independence is like a 10-year journey, and it's not a transaction, and it's not a moment in time. So if you ask any of us, when's the best time to start a 10-year journey? Well, probably today. There's no better time than the present. And I think for most people, they're thinking, oh, prices are so high. But, if you're trying to hit some number and you do the math, and most people who have median bay income salary, salary, and trying to hit some 6-figure number, you're going to require 10 or 20 houses to get there. So your journey is not a transaction and a point in time. You have
good
to,
point.
You might as well start learning what it takes and buy that first house, and learn what it takes to buy that second and third or fourth house. And there's no reason to wait 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years to start that, because it's going to take a while, and you're going to learn along the way.
That's awesome. Be an investor, not a gambler.
Yeah.
Invest for the long haul.
And that journey may be just reading a book or listening to a podcast or having a conversation with you. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to go buy a property today.
Yeah. Maybe tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow. But not 3 years from now.
Well, that's the thing, is there is this fear. There's always this fear, this voice in the back of the mind that, is there going to be another 2008 where I would lose everything, or a 2009 where I could buy so cheap? And if all you have to do is pull up a graph. You can go to Fred. It's the Federal Reserve of St. Louis. Just look it up, existing home sales or median home prices, and you'll see, even in the biggest recessions, prices continue to rise. So 10 years from now, most likely, based on history and based on the money creation, homes will be more expensive. Property will be more expensive. So you can wait, or you can get it cheaper today.
Right.
Right. Well, and I think there's also a question of what question are you asking? Is now the right time to buy a house, or to buy any house? And for me, maybe that's the wrong question. The question to me should be, if I'm going to buy a house and I want it to be investment for the next 7 to 10 years, what are the factors I look for in making sure that that's a good investment in terms of margin and safety, in terms of where you buy that house, so you are confident that no matter what happens in the economy, that this could be a good investment for me for the next 7 to 10 years. That's the right question, I think, rather than should I be buying any house anywhere at this time.
That's
Such
really
good stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Ben and Sophie, it's been such a pleasure to have you here on the Real Wealth Show. I've personally learned a lot from you, so thank you.
Well, thank you for having us, and also thank you for everything you do. As you've seen, all the houses we've purchased have been through the Real Wealth Network. Well, since those first two. Yeah. So we've certainly gained so much value from everything you do, from the affiliates, as well as the education, as well as these podcasts. So, we've gained so much from this. So thank you for what you do.
Awesome. Thank you.
That means a lot.
It does mean a lot. Awesome.
That's our why. All right. And thank you for joining us here on The Real Wealth Show. You can go to realwealthshow.com to get access to hundreds of free webinars and all kinds of information and referrals to really experienced property teams across the country who can help you get started in real estate. Again, that's realwealthshow.com.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell any securities or to make or consider any investment or course of action. For more information, go to realwealthshow.com.